So thank you all of you who've joined us today. It's our third webinar in our Housing First Europe Hub series, where we're looking at basically how can we use this moment during this new stage of the pandemic, where we've seen lots of quite good things happen around homelessness and housing, where we've seen things, for example, in the UK, where you had a lot of people move in from the streets straight into hotel and temporary accommodation. You saw that across Europe. The question that we have now is, what next? How can we, as a network who are promoting and supporting a transition to housing first and housing-led solutions, how can we use this moment to make sure that the solutions that come at this next stage of the pandemic are ones that are housing-based, housing rights-based, and appropriate solutions for people who have been homeless and who have been now in temporary accommodation. So it's with great pleasure that we welcome three speakers from France, and thank you to all three of them ahead of this session for agreeing to join us and to speak in English, because I know it's not, as many of us know, it's not easy to do these sorts of things in your first language, let alone in a second language. So we really appreciate that. And we're really delighted that we can talk to the three of you, because I think there are some really interesting things going on in France. And I can see that some of you are being very ambitious to use this moment to push for some things that really need to happen. And I'm delighted that we get a chance to explore those with you today. So what I will do is I will ask the three speakers just to take a moment to tell us who they are, where they are, and then we'll move into the presentations. So I'll hand over to Martine just to introduce herself, and then if she can just pass over to the other two speakers. Thanks.
Hello. So I'm Martine Chanal. I am from Métropole de Lyon. I'm responsible for the implementation of a housing first strategy across the Métropole. And our aim is to transform the housing sector and support services, to support innovative social projects, and to search for new resources to financing the actions. So, what can I say?
Manuel Domergue.
Okay. Hello. Hello, everyone. I'm Manuel Domergue. I'm the Director of Studies of the Abbé Pierre Foundation. It's a French foundation who's fighting against problems of housing in France and in Europe. And we have an annual report about housing problems in France and in Europe. We publish every year with the FEANSA.
And Manuel.
Yeah, hello, Manuel Hennin. I'm a project manager at the DIHAL, which is an entity attached to the Prime Minister's office and the Ministry of Housing, and we are responsible for the implementation of the Housing First plan that the French government launched in 2017. So we have been working there since then, trying to implement this plan and working with the local authorities in order to do it.
Great, thank you. So we'll move into the presentation now, and we'll ask Martine to make a presentation. So what we've done is we've asked Martine to present what they're trying to do in Lyon, which is very exciting. And then we've asked for the two Manuels to provide a sort of reflection from a national context. So they don't have a specific presentation, but it's more a discussion on the basis of Martine's presentation. So Martine, I hand it over to you.
Thank you very much for giving us the opportunity to speak during this meeting. For Lyon, it's a good opportunity to speak about our experiences. But I want to begin with the local context. Is the Métropole gather 59 cities for 1.3 million inhabitants. You can see the key figure on the diaporama. We have all the competence regarding homelessness because the Métropole was created in 2014 with the merger of 2 local authorities, and now he has almost all the competencies to take action to tackle the issue of homelessness. So the Métropole and its partners have been working together for a long time now, and we are ready to make the necessary shift to implement Housing First principles. To give you more information about the housing sector in the Métropole, you have some key figures, and we have around 70,000 ongoing requests for social housing. It's a lot of, it's very important, for only 10,000 available social housing units per year. So each household have to wait a long time to have a social housing. And at the end of 2019, there were 2,500 roof sleepers from an emergency call center. And we have also 15,500 people in shelter or accommodation. So it's important. That's what I can say. And if we are looking for Housing First in Métropole, since 2018, the Métropole was given the responsibility to implement Housing First at the local level with DIHAL. So we built this implementation upon three pillars, which are first the offer. The goal is to increase the supply of affordable housing. Second, the support project. We are giving grants for NGOs to implement an innovative model of social and support and access to housing. And third, the professional practice. We wish to change management strategy and professional practice to improve the implementation of Housing First principle. So with this program, we expect to achieve 4 goals within 5 years. Divide the number of homeless people by 2. Find a housing solution for young people coming out of children protection. Find a housing solution for all the people living in institutions like jail, mental hospital, and prevent evictions for situations where rents are too high or when mental health issues are the cause of housing difficulties. So, obviously, to achieve this transformation, specific requirements must be made. First, we need to write the story together. We organize permanent activities to mobilize every stakeholders and progress together on the implementation of Housing First. We also give the opportunity to NGOs to design their own transformation strategy. I think it's very important. Second, we need financial innovation to make the shift of scaling up the Housing First model. So we are working on a contrat impact social impact bond, and we are working with European banks to find new resources with the banks. And finally, we need to organize to manage the shift, and with training, evaluation, and exchange of good practice. So we can come back if you want, but I go ahead. Before speaking about our policy for the special moment, I want to say that in France, we have really 2 categories of people in terms of homelessness, and we can't use the same way to solve the problem. First, homeless people with rights. They have a valid administrative status. They can access to traditional form of housing. They can work. And of course, we have a lot of people, lot of homeless people with incomplete rights. They have no administrative status, like migrants with the refugee status. They do not have access to traditional form of housing. They cannot work. So you understand what I mean. It's not the same possibility for them. So we have to find other kinds of housing solution, like temporary housing or something like that. So I think it's important to speak about zéro remise à la rue. I don't know in English, it's zero return to the street. Mm-hmm. Because during the COVID crisis, the state and the Métropole have been very involved to manage and find solutions for homelessness. More than 1,500 homeless people have been provided with temporary housing in hotel or in temporary solution. 2 special medical centers for homeless people who have COVID-19, but who don't require hospitalization has been created. And the government, like you know, has extended the winter accommodation program until the 10th of July, in line with the new end date of the state of emergency. So at this time, the representative of the state and the Métropole in the Métropole area and the president, the former president, but I think the new president will stay in the same way, decide to launch a new plan called Zero Return to the Street to find new solutions for all these people. And until this moment, we are working to find solution. As part of this plan, 1,500 cases are identified as targets. It's not very important, but we need a lot of housing. So first, we want to accelerate allocation to households living in emergency shelters. To reach this goal, we have started to work with social housing companies. Because in France, we already have an intercommunal agreement with them providing that 6% of allocations must be for households living in shelter or for roof sleeper. For us, the goal is to agree on the principle of prioritizing allocation, no increase, but and go fast. In the context of a health crisis by the providers, the Métropole, the state, and Action Logement. We have negotiated for 500 housing. We need 500 units until October. Second, we want to increase temporary urbanism and housing solution. We need, because like I said before, a lot of homelessness are do not have rights. For all homelessness have right to go to housing. So we have to find new solution. We need to identify all opportunities of vacant land managed by the Métropole or other to increase our offer of temporary housing. And we have a first experimentation with L'Autre Soir, Homesick Road. And we try to find new fund to finance support to households. So we work with projects. We implement support methods that are already used in Housing First, but we need to look for new funding, and we are working with FNAVDL and ESH for new funding. And finally, we also wish to speed up the current works of the mobilization of dwelling for the private housing stock, but it's more difficult than it takes more time. So I think it's a long-term action. And to finish, to ensure an adequate implementation of this plan, we have an operational unit which gathers all stakeholders every 2 weeks, state, Métropole de Lyon, NGOs, social housing providers. So that's what I can say.
Super. That's excellent. Very good. I wonder if we I can maybe just take my speaker's privilege and ask a few questions just before we move on to the responses from Manuel. Just a question on the funding, just because there were some acronyms that I don't know are familiar to everybody. So when you said the new funding, where is that coming from, the funding for the support?
Emmanuel, c'est FNAVDL.
Even I don't know what that
is.
USH. USH is like the National Federation of Social Housing Providers, right? But the longer one, I've never seen that one before. So
I think Manuel can explain.
This is a national fund for financing support for homeless people going to housing. And it's also financed now by the social housing sector, by the state and by the social housing sector.
Okay, that's great. And then I just wanted to ask a question to Martine before we move to your your responses, because I find it really exciting and ambitious. And I wonder how did you get everybody to agree to do this?
It was a very nice opportunity, the crisis, because we know that we can show that we need a dwelling. Everybody need, with the lockdown, everybody need to have accommodation or housing to be safe. So we can say that it's and I think that we are ready to go to the target of Housing First. The implementation of Housing First began, and it's a good time to say now we have to go ahead.
Thank you. Okay, we'll give you a little rest, and we'll come back with more questions for you, I'm sure. But now I'll pass on to Manuel Domergue for your comments, your response, a bit of the national perspective, if you will.
Yes, of course. Hello, everyone. So what you have to know about Lyon and France is that Martine Chanal and Lyon, they are the best student in the class of Housing First in France. And so they have a plan. They had a plan, they have a new plan for today in the context of the COVID crisis. This is not the case of every city in France, far from that. If we see at the national level just the numbers, we had 143,000 homeless people in 2012 in France, up 50% from 2001. And today we are at 300,000, so twice as many as 8 years ago. So it's a failure. The Housing First in France, if we just see the facts, is a failure, but it doesn't mean that nothing is done, not at all. And Martine and Manuel Hennin and the DIHAL do a lot for Housing First. And there is a national plan for Housing First, and it's a good plan. The fact is that it's not enough at all just to mitigate the national tendencies to increase homelessness. So it's very frightening because many people work about Housing First, and it's not enough just to have a small progress. For example, we have more and more evictions from housing. It's the historical record. Almost 16,000 households evicted from the dwellings just in 2018. So it's very frightening. And perhaps we could think that the crisis COVID, as said Martine Chanal, it could be a luck, an opportunity for Housing First, because there is that effort by the cities, by the state, to allocate temporary accommodation, hotels, shelters to homeless people. And we could hope that we are not going to put back all those people in the street, and we're going to give them a real social housing. That's the hope. But we are not sure at all that it could be possible to succeed in that for many reasons. The first reason, and it's the main reason. Emmanuel Macron, our president, he said that whatever it cost, we had to, during the COVID crisis, we had to fight the COVID and to find solutions from homeless people. He went to shelter to prove that it was a political involvement, very important for him. But that's over. This is the end of that period, and whatever it costs, I think is not possible anymore, or it's not the way it works anymore. And so we are very afraid that from the 10th of July, so in 1 week, people are going to be evicted again and put back in the streets again, as it's as it is every year after winter. But it's not sure. It's going to depend on the involvement of the new government, the involvement of the new city manager, and perhaps there is going to be a change. What Martine said that was very interesting is that the city of Lyon is very particular because they have the skills, almost all the skills necessary to lead a real housing policy. This is not the case for other cities in France, except perhaps Strasbourg for historical reasons. But in the other big cities where the problem of homelessness is the most accurate, it's not the case. The skills are divided between the department, the city, the metropolis, the state, the association also. And so most often, even where there are some plans to implement housing first, this plan is not supported by all the public actors. There are some divisions. For example, in Grenoble, the city and the Métropole are involved for the housing first strategy, but it's not the case of the department. So very often there are some blockage because of that. If you take the most important city in France, Paris is not involved in the housing first strategy. This is the case of the department of Seine-Saint-Denis. It's just one department in the big metropolis of Paris. So it's more difficult to succeed in that way. Second, I think that the main tool to succeed in housing first strategy is the social housing allocation, and we see that it's a big challenge to give a social house to every homeless people. And Martine said it was 1,050 persons in Lyon, so it's not nothing at all. We don't have in France enough social houses for everyone. So if we want that homeless people have access to social housing, we must give a priority to these people. And it's not always the case. At a national scale, homeless people, they have only 6% of the new social housing allocation. It's not enough at all. And we could hope that we could give twice or three more to those people who should be the main priority for the social housing allocation. We published a few weeks ago with other French association a study which proves that among all the people waiting for a social house, the more you are poor and the less chance you have to receive a social house. It is absolutely scandalous. And so it's it's the responsibility of social housing institutions. They have to give more priority to homeless and very poor people. And it's not enough because we have some visions about their capacity to live correctly and to pay the rent like other citizens, but it's in many cases, this is a cliche, and this cliche has to be worked, has to be discussed by the professionals, by the authorities. And what did Lyon is very interesting to finance some degrees, formations to improve the capacity of all the actors to forget the cliche. So, but there is also a financial difficulty. It's that in France, social housing is very often too expensive for the very poor people. People in the street, when they have access to the lower basic income, it's 500 euros a month. It's not, sometimes it's not enough to pay the rent even of a very social housing. So the state has to do something for that. State has to give more funds to help very poor people to pay the rent in the social or the private sector. And the state has to give more funds to help social housing sector to build some cheaper housing. And this is not the case today, and this is less and less the case today. And the speech today deals with the alliances, the partnership to create. And there is a partnership to create between the state, the new cities, to finance more correctly the new social housing, and Europe. Europe has to give a part of these funds, and the social funds, the European social funds, has to be led, concentrate towards a housing first strategy. We are trying to do that with the DIHAL, by instance, and we hope that in the next few years we're going to succeed a little bit. But the Green New Deal, perhaps, of the European Green Deal, perhaps should also give a few billions for social housing. It will be interesting. But it's not the case today, so it's very very frightening for me. Two topics to conclude, which give some hope. The first, the sum clearance. For that, the DIHAL and the city of Lyon and Villeurbanne, just close to Lyon, are very interesting, because when everyone, the association, the state, the cities are going in the same direction, we succeed in solving that problem of the slum. I remind that 19,000 people in France live in that kind of slums. So it's not so much. It can be solved, but we have to concentrate support, social support, and new housing for these people. And it's not always the case, but when it's the case, for example, in Villeurbanne, in Toulouse, etc., it works, and it's a real long-term solution for that people. So if the DIHAL had more public money to help that, if the prefect, especially in Paris, and the Ile-de-France, the region, had more political priority for that, it could be solved in a few years. So that's an encouragement to action. And another blind point of the housing first in France, and Martine told that also, it's the people in irregular situation who have no French identity papers. In the vast majority of territories, they are not even mentioned in the housing first strategy. But in some places, association with the city, with the state, try to give them some solution. Very often they have to stay for years and years in hotel paid by the public fund, and it's not a good idea for anyone, especially for them. But there is a program that is called Alternative Hotel that tries to get them out from the hotel, to give them some real housing solution. And during that time, they try to help them to have a regularization file with the prefecture, and in the places where the prefecture try to help them, notably in the Puy-de-Dôme or in Occitanie, in Montpellier, etc. It works. So it proves that when we try to work together in that goal to succeed the Housing First strategy, it can really work. So which is positive with the National Plan of Housing First since 2017, is that the seeds of the Housing First are planted in France, and many people working in the housing sector talk about that. There are some formation, there are very numerous debates, etc. And so if we had more national funds, more local determination, I think we could go forward and succeed in that policy. But today, the national policy give less and less money to housing solutions, and de facto more and more money for temporary accommodation, hotel, and so it's the opposite of the Housing First strategy. So it cannot work if we don't change that kind of priority. So I'm finishing.
Thank you very much. It's a very good overview, and I think it points to exactly the issues in France. And I think that people from other countries can, I'm sure, recognize the same issues in their own countries. And but I think what's really heartening in France is that there is a national strategy, and as flawed as it might be at the moment in its implementation, at least that national strategy has the basis as the principles of Housing First at its core. But I think any national strategy is only as good as its implementation, and so it's important to continue to find ways to make sure that it is implemented in the right way. So not to put too much pressure on the other Manuel, because you're not responsible for the whole of the strategy. But I think it's really interesting too. I think also speaking from the Housing First Europe hub, what's really interesting and useful for us is that all three of you are part of our network. And so that means that there's people from very much the local level, from Martine from Lyon, where it's very much about the application, about shifting the things that can be shifted at local or regional level. Manuel from Fondation Abbé Pierre, which is like a very large, very effective advocacy organization, but also an organization that delivers services. But then also to have the DIHAL as part of our network with that government perspective in terms of the planning and the strategy. But also the DIHAL does a lot around training and helping to try and make this shift. I think that was something that Martine brought up very importantly too, is how do you shift those assumptions, both within the sector itself, and as Manuel just said, also amongst the people working with homeless people. What can we expect of people who are homeless in terms of being able to live in apartments and pay rents and so on. So, and I think that the DIHAL is also working on that in a way that not maybe every national government is. So I think that's interesting too. So now I'll hand over to Manuel Hennin to give us your response and your comments, and then we'll open it up for more discussion and questions at the end.
Thank you, Samara. Thank you very much. A lot has been said already, so I'll try to bring some new elements to the discussions. I think the period that we've just gone through has only strengthened and confirmed our determination, our ambition in implementing Housing First and this large housing-led strategy that we have in France. And it has also, I think, brought some new perspectives and positive perspectives for homelessness reduction in France, as Martine and Manuel already pointed out. So I have to say first that during the lockdown period, so from mid-March to mid-May, more than 20,000 new beds were opened in emergency accommodation in France, in shelters or hotels, which brings up the total capacity of accommodations up to 178,000 units in France. So it's a lot. It's I think it shows that accommodation, temporary accommodation, is kind of a drug, right? That it's hard to get away from, and because it's immediate, it's easy to open, but then we need to find other solutions for these people. I think it still brought two very interesting consequences. First one is that the demand pressure dropped in France during this period, and then we can now say that in some territories the situation is very close to 0% sleeping rough, or at least very few people left without any solution. So this was, well, I wouldn't say nowhere to be seen, but it was very not that frequent before the crisis. So I think this is something that we need to take into account, and that is still quite positive. And the other thing is that some people were accommodated were unknown from social services before the crisis, or at least they didn't want to use the services because they felt that didn't meet their expectations, their needs, their wills. So I think it's a good reminder that we need to find more new solutions and keep innovating in homelessness reduction. And it's a good reminder that we need to keep working with the people themselves, right? The homeless people themselves, because it's some kind of a new alliance that we need to build and strengthen, at least in France. And during the crisis, we had a series of meetings with the people from an entity that is called CNPA. It's an entity that in France is what elects some kinds of delegates from homeless people, so they can talk to the government and to the institutions and bring some kinds of insights to help build better policies. So we had very regular talks with them so that we could get the opinion on the situation, and also explain what was going on, what was the response and the solution that were implemented. So I think that was something that we need to keep working on. Since mid-May, we're working on reactivating the dynamics in the efforts on access to housing. And Manuel talked about access to social housing. It's a clear priority that we're having now. A month ago, the Minister of Housing issued instructions to its services, so setting an objective on access to housing, and he asked that there would be 3,000 social housing allocation to homeless people by the end of July, and 17,000 by the end of the year. So it's still not enough for sure compared to the demand, but it's still more than what was done the years before. And I think we also need to take into account that we will face a severe crisis. At least this is my expectation in the social housing sector, with a turnover rate that is going to be probably decreasing in the coming month, and maybe in the coming years, if we get installed in the coming crisis. So we will also have few opportunities in the social housing sector. So as Martin said, it's a matter of prioritizing, and this is something that we need to do very fast. But it's also the crisis has also been an opportunity to promote access to housing for people who had were sleeping rough just a couple of months ago, and who had just been accommodated during the crisis. So we don't want them to stay in shelters and to stay in temporary accommodation. We want them to access housing in the coming weeks and months. And in this sense, I think we're very fully in line with the Housing First principles. So this is a big. I think it could bring some interesting changes in the way we operate today in France. there will be more money in 2021. I think in all sectors there will be some new money put in order to try to relaunch the system and to support all the services that were deeply affected by the lockdown and the pandemic. It is our responsibility also to well to avoid that all this money comes to goes to temporary accommodation, and that's more resources are allocated to housing first services, but also to social services in general and support services, so that we can have more capacity to initiate some support in the street or in temporary accommodations, and to bring people into housing and help help them secure this housing in time. Last thing that I wanted to point out before opening the discussion is that we need to deepen the collaboration with local authorities. And as Martin said, we've already started with working with some of them. And since 2018, we're working with 23 municipalities or territories in France to implement housing first strategies, housing-led plans, in order to shift the paradigm and to on homelessness reduction. So all these territories hired a housing first project manager. So this is also a network that is disseminated around France that is used to create this this momentum on housing first. That you were asking, Martin, how is it possible that everyone agrees now on this plan? I think it's something that we've all worked on in the last years, to plant the seeds, as Manuel said, and then make it grow, so that housing first now is more something more obvious for decision makers and for every professional in the field. We'll keep working with these territories, and we'll try to launch a new call for interest, so that more territories join the movement, and that we can extend the field of housing first. We are in a context of elections, so we are now seeing new executives being installed at the head of municipalities in France. So we'll have to work promoting and explaining housing first to all these new people. But I think that housing first brings some new significance to the idea of inclusive cities. Inclusive cities has been some very important since maybe 2015, when we had some important immigration flows into France. But now inclusive cities is something that we can revive with housing first, and we can say that homelessness is no longer a competence or responsibility for the state only, but it's a shared responsibility. And that I think the shared strategy that we've been experiencing in the last decades is only some kind of symptom of an idea of some kind of extraterritoriality of homelessness. And now we're saying, no, homeless people are just citizens, and that they need a home, they need access to employment, to support services, to social services, to health services. And this we can only achieve if the state, the local authorities, and local actors work together. So just to finish with the priorities of this collaboration between the state and the local authorities. There are many, but I think we need to work on articulating our resources on social and health services, so that we can mainstream some more integrated and pluridisciplinary solutions. We need to work on increasing the housing solutions. I think Martine already developed that part, and I will not develop on this, but I agree as well that we need to investigate some more temporary solutions, not accommodation solutions, but temporary housing solution, working on some temporary vacant spaces or buildings, so that we can extend the opportunities for housing. And the last thing is that we need to work on prevention much more. I think this is still something, as Manuel said, that we're not the best at. And the local network is very critical when we talk about prevention and identifying the situation that may be at risk and preventing this situation from worsening. So this is also something that we can't achieve from a national perspective, and we need to work with cities and field actors. So in this cooperation, national state can bring money. They still can bring money on supported housing, on engineering, but it's only something that we can achieve together.
Wow, thank you very much. I think, yeah, you hit a lot of those questions that we'd all been sort of thinking about, again, in our own context, not just in the context of France. I think we'll open it up to questions. I just had one question, again, taking my privilege of having control of the moderator position. I just wanted to come back to the issue, Martine, in particular around undocumented people who are now part of this question and part of this equation, because in many, well, everywhere else pretty well, when we talk about housing first, that's really the elephant in the room, where we have to say, we can't talk about that right now, we have to focus on getting started, and then we can maybe answer it later. And so it's really a breakthrough to hear of somewhere where they're saying, okay, we are going to talk about it now, and we're not going to push it to the side. So I don't know, Martine, if you could say a little bit more specifically about how you're tackling that issue. What kinds of solutions are you finding? Do you have to change laws? How do you actually make it possible to find housing first or housing solutions for people who don't have the right to housing or the right to support?
We have a first experiences with Home Silk Road, the project for UEA, Urban Innovative Action. We have found for a big project where we try to implement modular, but very nice modular, not like, I don't know how to say that, but it's very nice in wood and with système for, comment ça, contre la précarité énergétique, Samara.
So with, yeah,
il est isolé, quoi.
Prevent energy poverty. So
yes, so it's I think it's a good module temporary, and we will implement this module in a big project of urbanization, because we have 2 or 3 years with land, and we can try to install this modular system. So we are looking with housing provider, Métropole de Lyon, state, and all of the partners, if we have land, or if we have a local vacancy, and we try to build a project to host people, but we have to finance the support, of course, and until now it's the state that the state paid for this support. But I think if we have a better if the Métropole invest in the land and invest in the building, the state could pay more nights. We have to share the cost of this policy. Yeah. We have to find a new model for policy of shelter. Until now, the state pay all the action, investment, yeah, and functionment, and it's not good. It's not good. It doesn't work well. So I think it will be better if the city find solution for invest, because we can have des prêts, déjà on dit des prêts,
Loans.
loans. It's not the same financial model, and I think it will be more efficient. So we have to discuss with the state, but until now, the state and the local authority don't want to speak about this topic. So I think we have to make the shift.
Yeah,
it's clear.
No, but I think that it's about moving the investment into more permanent structures, so that the state is not investing primarily in temporary accommodation, where they have to pay the burden of the building the structures and funding the support. Whereas, if you can move it so that there's more investments at a local level into the infrastructure, which is housing, and it's more sustainable and just better in general, then the state still has a role to pay for the support, but it's a much lesser role because you won't need as much support for people who are in homes who are in temporary accommodation or shelters. There's an interesting comment that's come up in the chat, and it's about the messaging, which I think also links into what we've just said, is that it's the messaging about how, if you're talking about the financing of this is very much more a sustainable approach to making sure that investments and public funds go into something that has a much longer term and more effective results than in, I did really appreciate, Manuel, your analogy of shelters as being a kind of drug, because indeed it's something that we build really quickly and it has a really quick effect, but it's not a long-term solution. But it's something that all governments can say, oh, look, we built some beds, that's great, everybody's okay, but it doesn't have the long-term impact that we all need. So I think, I know it doesn't completely answer the point in the chat, which I think is an interesting parallel point. So thank you for that. Maybe I'll just see, are there any other questions? If there's other questions, please feel free to put them into the chat and we'll read them out. And I'll just say, there were a couple of things just before we go that came up in the questions when people registered for the seminar. So I just wanted to ask one of them. It was around how do we, and Manuel Hennin touched on it a bit, is like, how do we make sure we can prevent evictions better than we are doing now? What is it that we can do to sort of stop the flow? I mean, Housing First is not the solution, it's not a prevention solution, but it does have a role. So how do we, all of us, think about stopping that flow into homelessness so that we can spend more time on people who need the supports, rather than having to necessarily manage a huge flow of people coming into homelessness? So I don't know if Manuel Domergue, you want to say something about prevention?
Just something very simple, perhaps too simple, to avoid the evictions. It just avoid to do that. Police evict people, state evict people. So if we don't want to evict people anymore, we just have to do nothing, just avoiding sending policemen to evict people in the morning in 1 week. The government said yesterday that they were going to publish a text giving not the order but the asking to prefects to avoid evictions. It's not a law, and we know that kind of text very often is not sufficient to avoid effectively that the policemen evict people. We know that because there were some kind of text like this before in the past to avoid the eviction of the DIHAL people who are who have the right. They are, how can I say in English? And it's people we are.
Yeah. The people who are claiming their right to housing.
Yeah, and people for whom justice in France say that they have the right to rehousing, and even in that case, which doesn't concern a lot of people, it is not respected. The prefects send policemen to evict them. So it's just a political voluntarism issue. If we don't want to evict people anymore, we don't do that. It's the police, it's us, it's the government. Of course, it's not easy. It's easy to say, as I do, but it's not easy to do effectively, because you have to give money to the landlords in exchange. So it costs. But I think it's also an answer to the questions that has been asked here. It's certainly cheaper to do that than to send police and to reallocate a housing solution or a shelter to the people evicted. So it's a choice, and it's not a political choice that has been done until now.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I have to disagree a little bit because this is part of my job, right? No, but I think Manuel said it, like if we decide to stop evictions, then of course it's not, we can just stop sending policemen, but then at the end we are, especially if we are in a private rented sector, we need to pay for the rent, right? As the state must pay for the rent, so that there's no at the end the main fear is that people would stop renting out their dwellings to people they're not perfectly 100% sure that they will pay in the long term. So if we don't want to increase eviction of people from the private rented sector, we need to build confidence, right? And confidence also means that if you have someone that doesn't pay in the long run, then you are able to evict him in at the end. So I think that's also something that we're trying to do, is that we're trying to shift the debate from this question, that is like, how do we act at the very end of the procedure, and shift it to the very more upfront point, where we are like, how can we act at the very beginning when situations, the risks appears, when we can have light signals of situation that might worsen in the future, and that if we don't want to get to a point where the only solution is only to pay for the rent in the long run, which is not a solution for the households, by the way, or to evict this household. If we want to avoid getting to this point, we need to act much earlier in the process. And this is also something that is, well, that might be obvious, right, when you say it, but it's a lot about how we can invest to avoid costs in the future, and that is also often something that decision makers are not very comfortable with doing, right? It's not the easiest thing, although it seems to be the most obvious thing to do. I just wanted to add on what Andrea said in the chat section. I think as any shift in paradigm, the part of the battle is to be won in the semantic field, right? And it's true that we need to keep working on the message that we want to pass. And I think there's something that is very hard to combat in France, and probably elsewhere as well, is that we say when we open emergency shelters, or we accommodate people in hotels, we say it's better than nothing, than doing nothing. Mm-hmm. And it's just, it narrows down the alternative to just doing nothing, or accommodating people in hotels. And we are here and we say, no, we need to open up the possibilities, and we need to find more relevant solutions, more sustainable solutions. And this is something that is, better than doing nothing is just so obvious for everyone that is very detrimental to the ship that we're trying to achieve. So it's true that it's a lot of lobbying and finding the right words, the right phrases, and having people understand them.
Thank you. Maybe Martine, I don't know if you have any sort of words to give us in conclusion, because I think we're past our time now. But I want to give you a chance to comment
we are trying to find new support to prevent eviction. So I think we have a solution for that. We can make mediation or find some tools for that. So, but it's local response.
Yeah. Well, I think we'll probably have to close it here because I think we've gone past our original time allotment. But there's some really interesting questions in the chat that I think people can maybe take away with them. And I hope that you found it interesting, and that if we invite you back for another discussion, maybe in September, I'm finding these conversations really interesting, especially because we don't get a chance now to meet in person very often or at all. So I'm delighted to be able to see so many people, at least on my screen, if not in person. And I think it's really interesting to see here in the chat this question about, how do you, the differences between different countries, and how have things changed because of the pandemic or not. But I'm afraid we're not going to be able to take it necessarily here live, but it's a question to bring up maybe in a future session. So thank you to Martine and to Manuel for joining us today. Especially again, thank you for speaking in English and for the presentation. We've recorded this session, and we will edit it to put it up on our website in the next few weeks. So if you hear of somebody who missed the chance to join us today and want to join us later, just let them know. It will be available in a little bit. I think we'll probably take a bit of a break over the summer because a lot of people are moving away on holiday and so on, but hopefully we'll be able to come back in the autumn with some new webinars and to invite you back, and hopefully we'll get to see some of you in person at some point soon too. So thank you all, and take good care.